Have you ever wondered what it feels like to live miles away from anyone else, surrounded only by fields, forests, and silence, where the darkness at night is absolute, and every noise echoes like a warning? You might think that the countryside is peaceful, but for those who've lived on the land, there's a much darker side to rural life. A side filled with whispers in the cornfields, shadows that move when no one's there, and old barns that hold secrets older than your grandparents. These are real stories, told by real farmers, people who've faced things that defy logic, break sanity, and haunt their nights forever. And once you hear them, you'll never look at a farm the same way again. Tonight, we uncover true tales from the most isolated parts of the world, places where help is hours away, where cell phones don't work, where if you scream, no one hears you. Each of these farmers had their lives turned upside down by events that can't be explained. And as you listen, ask yourself, would you survive what they went through? Or would the land claim you too? Stay until the end, because the last story might just be the most disturbing thing you'll hear all year. Life on a farm is unlike anything in the city. There's a silence that feels almost sacred, and yet at times that same silence becomes suffocating. Out here, when night falls, it falls hard. No streetlights, no neighbors, just an ocean of darkness stretching across endless fields. You hear every creak, every gust of wind, every rustle in the corn. But sometimes you hear things that shouldn't be there at all. It's in this kind of eerie isolation that some of the most chilling stories begin. Our first story comes from a farmer named Dale, a man in his 50s who's worked the land his entire life. Tough, quiet, not the type to be spooked by stories. His property sits in a remote part of the Midwest, surrounded by thick cornfields on all sides, a place where the nearest town is over 20 miles away. One evening, just before harvest season, Dale put up a scarecrow in the middle of his southern field. It was something he did every year, just a burlap sack stuffed with hay, an old flannel shirt, jeans, and a straw hat. Nothing unusual, but this time, something felt off. He couldn't explain it. Maybe it was the way the wind stopped every time he looked at it, or the way the birds stayed silent whenever he passed by. But he pushed the thoughts aside. After all, a scarecrow is just fabric and straw, right? That night a storm rolled in, heavy rain, wind that howled like wolves, lightning cutting across the sky. Dale was lying in bed when he heard a loud thump against the side of his barn. Then another thump. He grabbed his flashlight and boots, thinking maybe a tree branch had broken off. As he stepped outside, rain pouring down, the light from his porch flickered once, twice, then went out completely. Only the beam from his flashlight guided him now. When he rounded the corner of the barn, the scarecrow was gone. Dale froze. The beam from his flashlight trembled slightly in his hand, sweeping across the field, searching for any sign of movement. The scarecrow, which should have been tied tightly to a wooden cross in the center of the southern field, was nowhere in sight. The pole was still there, but the ropes hung loose, swinging in the wind. Rain splashed into the dirt, turning the ground into thick mud beneath his boots. For a long moment, he thought maybe the storm had knocked it loose. Maybe the wind dragged it away. But then he noticed the tracks, not blown leaves or fallen branches, but deep footprints in the mud, shaped like boots, leading away from the field. Step by step, Dale followed them. They weren't scattered or disorganized like the wind might cause. They were straight, deliberate, headed toward the old equipment shed behind the house, the one he hadn't used in years. Every instinct in his body told him to turn around, to get back inside, to lock the door and wait until morning. But farmers don't scare easy, and Dale wasn't the kind of man to let his imagination get the better of him. He approached the shed slowly, the door creaking open with a rusty groan. The smell hit him first: musty straw, moldy wood, and something else, something rotten. He shined the flashlight inside and swept it across the room. There it was, standing, upright, not leaning on anything. The scarecrow, but it wasn't slumped like before. Its posture was different. It stood as if it were aware, shoulders squared, head slightly tilted, and the arms, which had once been tied to a cross, now hung at its sides. Dale stared at it, heart pounding so loud he could hear it in his ears. That was when he noticed something else. The scarecrow was holding something in its hand. An old carving knife from the farmhouse kitchen. Dale stumbled backward, slipping in the mud, the flashlight tumbling from his grip and shattering on a rock. Darkness swallowed everything. He crawled away blindly, soaked and shaking, until he finally reached the house. He locked the doors, every single one, sat in the living room with a loaded shotgun and waited for the sun to rise. The next morning, when he returned to the shed, in broad daylight, the scarecrow was back in the field, tied to the post, just like before, except now its head was turned slightly, facing the house. This next story comes from a young farmer named Lucas, who inherited a large cornfield in Nebraska after the sudden death of his uncle. The land was old, and so was the farmhouse that came with it. A long gravel road separated it from the main highway, and the closest neighbor was nearly 4 miles away. Lucas had grown up in the city. He wasn't used to this kind of silence. Out there at night, there was nothing but wind through the stalks and the occasional chirp of crickets. But on his second week living there, the nights started to change. It began with a whisper, faint, so soft at first, he thought it was the wind. He'd be sitting on the porch just after sunset when he'd hear it. A voice carried through the corn, calling his name. Lucas, always the same, slow, soft. A voice like someone trying not to wake a sleeping child. He'd snap his head around, stand up, look into the endless rows of corn, but nothing, just the wind brushing through leaves. He told himself it was stress, moving alone, adjusting to farm life. Maybe he was imagining things, but the voice kept coming. Every night, same time, same tone, and then it changed. One night the voice wasn't whispering anymore. It was closer, louder. He was brushing his teeth in the upstairs bathroom when he heard it right beneath the window. Lucas! He ran outside with a flashlight, heart pounding, scanning the field. Nothing, no footsteps, no animals, just the corn swaying gently as if mocking him. He tried recording the sound on his phone, but every time he played it back, there was nothing there, just static. He even tried staying up all night with a rifle by his side, determined to catch whoever was messing with him. But the voice never came when he waited for it, only when he let his guard down. And then came the worst night of all. Lucas had tried everything. Noise-canceling headphones, sleeping pills, even blasting music late into the night just to drown it out. But the voice kept finding its way in, through the walls, through the silence, through the dark. It wasn't just saying his name anymore, it was whispering things he couldn't understand. Strange, broken phrases, sentences that made no sense, like the roots remember, and it's already inside. The worst part, the voice was starting to sound familiar, as if it were learning how to mimic someone close to him, someone he trusted. That night, it sounded just like his mother. He didn't sleep, couldn't. Instead, he sat in the kitchen, shotgun on the table, eyes locked on the back door. The wind had picked up again, and outside, the stalks of corn waved like hands. That's when the motion sensor light turned on. Something was moving outside. Slowly, carefully, Lucas stood and moved toward the window. Just beyond the porch, at the edge of the cornfield, something was standing there. He couldn't make out its face, just a tall, human-like figure, motionless, watching. Then the voice came again. This time, it wasn't a whisper. It was loud, deep, like it was inside the house. "I see you." Lucas spun around. No one. The door was still locked, windows shut tight, but the lights flickered above him and a loud thud echoed from the basement. Heart racing, he opened the basement door and aimed the shotgun into the dark. "Who's down there?" he shouted. No reply, just breathing, slow, wet, right beneath him. He fired once, the sound shattering the silence. But when he finally worked up the courage to go down there, the basement was empty. No blood, no footprints, just dirt, and one single object left in the center of the floor. A corn husk, twisted into the shape of a mouth, wide open. The next morning, Lucas packed his truck and left the farm. He never went back, but the people who bought the property from him, they moved out after 3 weeks. No explanation, just left everything behind. Furniture, clothes, even food on the table. And in the voicemail they left with the sheriff's department, only one thing was clear. The last word the new owner said was, "Lucas." This story takes us further back to the 1970s in a small, tight-knit farming town in Pennsylvania. It's told by a woman named Ruth, now in her late 60s, but who, at the time, was just 13 years old. Her family owned a modest farm, passed down through 4 generations, a place built by her great-grandfather after escaping the war in Europe. They lived off the land, respected it, and never questioned the old rules, like never plowing the eastern side of the property and never digging near the cluster of elm trees behind the barn. It was just how things were, until her older brother Caleb decided to break those rules. Caleb had always been curious, restless. He hated being told what not to do, especially by their strict grandfather. One summer afternoon, while clearing brush near the elm trees, Caleb hit something solid beneath the dirt. It wasn't a rock or a root. It was circular, carved stone. After hours of digging, he revealed what looked like the rim of an old well, sealed with a rusted iron lid and thick chains looped across the top. He ran back to the house, shouting for Ruth to come see it. And though every part of her said to leave it alone, curiosity dragged her there. The well was wrong. It was cold, even though the sun was beating down. The stone had strange markings carved into it, symbols no one recognized. Her grandfather arrived moments later, and when he saw it, his face turned white. He didn't say a word, just sent them both back to the house. That night, they heard him outside with a shovel and padlock, resealing it in silence. But something had already been let loose. From that night forward, things changed. Animals refused to go near the elm trees. Milk soured within hours. The crops closest to the well started to rot, twisting into strange, unnatural shapes. Caleb began sleepwalking, muttering in a language no one understood. And Ruth, she started hearing things, voices, chanting, always at midnight, always from beneath the floorboards. Then came the night Caleb disappeared. The night Caleb disappeared, there was a storm, the kind that shakes a house to its foundation. Thunder cracked across the sky like bones snapping. The power went out just before midnight. Ruth remembered lighting candles in the hallway when she heard the sound, the heavy back door creaking open. She called out for Caleb. No answer, just wind and rain sweeping across the kitchen tiles. She grabbed her flashlight, heart pounding, and stepped outside. The rain was thick, blinding, but she could see the mud and the footprints, bare, leading away from the house, toward the elm trees, toward the well. Her grandfather was already there when she arrived, kneeling in the dirt, flashlight in one hand, shotgun in the other. His eyes were locked on the well and what had been done to it. The padlock broken, chains tossed aside like string. The lid had been dragged open, just wide enough for someone to slip through. He whispered something in Polish under his breath, a prayer maybe, and told Ruth to go back inside. She didn't move. That's when they heard it, a scream from the bottom of the well. Not Caleb's voice, not anymore. It was distorted, deeper, like something ancient was using his throat to speak. And it didn't scream just once. It repeated the same phrase over and over. "Let me out, let me out, let me out." The sound rose until it became a shriek that shattered the silence of the storm, and then nothing. Her grandfather sealed the well that night with cement and salt. He poured holy water around the stones. The next morning, he took Ruth aside and made her promise, never speak of it again, never go near that place, and never, ever try to dig it up. Caleb was gone, just gone. No search team ever found a body. The police called it a runaway, but Ruth knew the truth. And her grandfather knew it too. Years later, after he passed away, Ruth inherited the farm, but she never lived there again. The house still stands, abandoned, slowly rotting into the earth. But locals say that sometimes, when the wind is just right, you can still hear it. Not a scream, not a voice, but the clinking of chains coming from deep underground. This last story comes from a man named Daryl, a third-generation farmer from Iowa, known for documenting his daily life on social media. He had a quiet following. Thousands of people watched his drone footage, sunrise harvests, and long tractor rides. But in 2022, Daryl uploaded something different, a nighttime video. Shaky, disoriented. It was only 30 seconds long, but it blew up instantly. Because what people saw didn't make sense. Let's go back to the night it was filmed. Daryl was working late, harvesting corn with his brand new autonomous tractor. One of those machines guided by GPS and AI. It could drive itself along. The rouse, and he just had to monitor the dashboard from his pickup nearby. But around 11:48 p.m., something strange happened. The dashboard blinked, the signal dropped, the tractor kept moving. That wasn't supposed to happen. He grabbed a flashlight and followed the lights of the tractor in the distance. They were still on, piercing through the night, like twin white eyes gliding through the sea of corn. He called out, no answer. The radio was dead. As he got closer, he realized the tractor wasn't following the usual path. It was turning, slowly, cutting a spiral into the field. It was like watching a machine being led by something invisible, something that knew exactly where it wanted to go. Then it stopped. Abruptly, he approached cautiously. No movement, no sound. The corn was unnaturally still. That's when he noticed the cabin door was wide open, and someone was sitting inside, or at least something that looked like someone. Daryl froze. His flashlight beam was shaking in his hand, casting warped shadows across the interior of the tractor cabin. The figure inside wasn't moving. Its back was to him, slumped, still. At first he thought maybe it was a scarecrow, a prank, but then it shifted, just slightly, and the air around him dropped by several degrees. He called out, voice cracking, "Hey, you okay?" No response, just silence, until the radio on his hip screeched to life. But it wasn't static. It was his own voice, repeating the exact same words he'd just spoken. "Hey, you okay?" Played back to him like a recording, then again warped, distorted. "Hey, you okay?" As if something was mimicking him, his blood went cold. Slowly, he climbed up the side of the tractor, trying to get a better look. Inside, the figure was tall, unnaturally thin. Its skin was gray, tight like plastic stretched over bone, and its head was wrong, oversized, tilted too far, like it had been dislocated and just left that way. But the most disturbing part was the eyes, glossy, milky white, no pupils, and yet Daryl knew it was looking right at him. Then, without warning, the tractor's engine roared to life. The figure lunged forward, slamming both hands on the controls, and the entire machine jerked forward, with Daryl still on the side. He screamed, nearly falling as the tractor barreled into the field, swerving violently. It was no longer following any path. It was hunting. The corn parted like waves, and for a moment Daryl could swear he saw shapes moving alongside them. Dozens, no hundreds, flickering between the stalks, watching, following. He finally jumped off, tumbling into the dirt, and rolled into the shadows to hide. The last thing he saw before the tractor disappeared into the distance was the figure turning its head a full 180 degrees, locking eyes with him, smiling. Daryl never found the tractor again. Authorities claimed it must have malfunctioned and driven itself into a ravine, but that 30-second video he managed to upload. It ends with one last frame, a still shot from his flashlight, showing the figure inside the tractor cabin, staring into the lens, one hand raised, waving. No one knows what it was. But since that night, multiple farmers across the Midwest have reported strange lights in their fields, GPS glitches, voices on dead radios, and always, that same image burned into their minds. A pale face, a crooked neck, and a smile that didn't belong to anything human. 4 stories, 4 farmers, different times, different places, but a single unshakable thread connects them all. The land doesn't forget, and sometimes it remembers things we were never meant to know. From shadows in the barn to wells that whisper at midnight, from hands reaching through the corn to machines guided by unseen forces. These aren't stories told to scare children. These are stories passed down in silence, in glances, in rules that are followed without question, because those who live closest to the earth, they know. The soil holds secrets, old ones, dark ones, and once disturbed, they don't go back. To sleep easily, you might be watching this from the safety of your bedroom, a city apartment. Maybe you've never stepped foot on a real farm. Maybe you think it's all fiction, but tell that to the families who left in the middle of the night. Tell that to the ones who still hear knocking on their grain silos. Tell that to the towns where nothing grows anymore and no one dares ask why. You see, rural life isn't as quiet as it seems. Sometimes when the sun goes down, it becomes a different world, one where the rules bend, where logic breaks, and where the night belongs to something else entirely. So the next time you're driving through the countryside and you see a light flickering in an empty field, don't stop, don't investigate, and whatever you do, don't wave back, because out there in the dark, something might be waiting, and it's already seen you. Now, if these stories got under your skin, and you want more true disturbing tales from places no one dares to explore, don't just scroll past. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next, because this was only the beginning.